Hello everyone, let's talk about exporting in Final Cut X, which Final Cut X has the touchy-feely title of sharing for it, which just makes me lose a little bit of respect for Final Cut Pro. Normally we would just call that exporting, so sharing, you know, I don't know. I think it's a little dopey because we're not always sharing this. We might be just exporting a master file that we want to keep for ourselves that nobody gets to see. So is that sharing? No. But you can also export DVDs, Blu-rays, upload to YouTube, Facebook, Vimeo, that sort of thing. So you got a lot of options for where you're gonna where you can output your videos. A lot of presets so that you don't necessarily have to figure out what all sorts of settings that you want, and you can export just exactly as it is in the timeline for a master file for you to hold on to. And you can customize the heck out of settings too if you want to do something really weird. But it is slightly tricky exporting. There are a few gotchas on this, so we're going to go over those elements now. So first of all, to export, you got a couple of options for how you can do it. You can select the project in the timeline and then hit the share button over here. And here are a whole bunch of presets for you for DVD, for making a master file, for Apple devices, Facebook, and you can log in here through Final Cut X so that when you export it just goes directly to Facebook or directly to YouTube, that kind of thing. So it saves you a little bit of time, which is kind of nice. So all of that is here. So you can do that and more. There's more settings there. So you can do that from the timeline here, or you can select the project here and export it, share it that way. The difference is that if you have an in and out selected in the timeline, when you export from the timeline, it will it'll export just that in and out. But if you have the project selected up here, when you export, it will not export just the in and out. It will export everything. And it's also good just to be aware of what you have selected before you hit share, because I could have this selected and think that because the DV test project is open that this is what I'm exporting. But actually, if I hit share right now, I'm sharing the multicam project instead. So that's a little bit of a gotcha. And you can see when the timeline is selected, we see numbers here and the timeline gets a little bit brighter. And when the project file is selected, it goes dark and we lose our timecode numbers here. So that's one kind of clue that's trying to show you a little bit about what is currently selected. All right. So a couple of different options there. And if you want to find your project, for whatever reason you want to export it from here, you can go to Smart Collections. This is where Final Cut organizes all sorts of different elements of your library for you based on keywords. And if you click on that, you'll see there's a default project keyword. So anything that's a project is going to show up there. And so you can easily see all the projects for your library and select the one that you want to export to. So as I said, you can mark an in and out if you want. One kind of gotcha is that if you mark an in and an out somewhere, you don't see it here. So maybe you've scrolled off somewhere over this way and you're not totally aware that you have an in and out marked. If you go to share from the timeline, it will only share that one part. So I would suggest, especially when you're just new to editing, that you do use an in and an out when you export, just so that you can export a small portion of your project and confirm that you got your settings right. Because one of the things that I do all the time is I set up to share one huge giant project, and then I let it crank, whatever. It takes quite a while sometimes to export these. And then I'll come back and find out I screwed something up. I had something slightly off or in my settings or something of that nature, and I have to start over. So as you get more experience with the editor, you can work around some of these things, and you can even save some of your export settings so that you're not kind of starting over every time you export. But I would recommend start practicing a little bit, doing a little test before you commit to hours of sharing and then find out that you got something wrong. So important to know that, and the shortcut for clearing the in and out if you want to make sure that you don't have an in and out in your timeline is Option X. That will get rid of that. So that's even something you could do just as a precaution when you want to export your full project. Hit Option X and that will clear out everything. Or again, if you export from the project file here, you'll know that the in and out won't be selected. So let's see. When you choose to export something, so let's say that we're going to first create our master file of this particular timeline. We can go to share, and then they have a default here. They also have DVD, all these other options. We can hit master file, and you can see it gives me some information about the tags for this project and the current settings for it. But I can also go into settings, and I have a few things I can tweak. I can tweak, do I want video and audio, just audio, other Apple, publishing options. What video codec do I want to use? Codec is a coder decoder. So whole bunch of different ways that you can export this. So this is within the QuickTime file. How are you basically compressing this video, or not compressing it in some ways? So this could be a little bit complicated, and generally, like for example, the more numbers here and the higher they are, typically the better. So this Apple ProRes 4444XQ is going to be higher quality than this Apple ProRes 422 proxy. And so you can, anytime you see proxy, you should set off a little alarm that you're exporting something that's not, that's a stand-in, right? So a whole bunch of different options here. What do you want to choose for that? Do you want to include chapter markers? What do you want to open this file with? And so a whole lot of different options there. So what you can do with, if you just want to export this as it is, you can choose master file and basically leave everything alone, and you should be good to go. If you just want to do, if you want to export it but you want it to be lower quality, or you know what you're doing, or you have very specific settings. So sometimes somebody will come to you and say, I need it exported in a certain way. For example, in the TV studio at UAF, we have decks that will only play Apple ProRes files. So I have to export Apple ProRes. And so if you make changes to this, you can save those changes later. There are some reasons why you might want to export video only and audio only. For example, when I am giving people a rough draft of a video in the very early stages, I won't typically include the video. I'll just include the audio because it's just a bunch. Typically, it's just a bunch of interviews. So it's very rough, and so people can just listen to the interviews and see which sound bites I chose to use and whatnot, and so just do that. Another reason you might export audio only is maybe you're making a DVD and you want to have multiple audio options for people. For example, you want to have a director commentary. So in that case, you might want to have two different types of audio for the same video file, one that includes the director commentary, one that doesn't, or maybe you have it dubbed in another language, that kind of stuff. So there are some reasons why you want to do that. Video only, I'm trying to think of a time where I've only, yeah, maybe it could be that this is a project that, I don't know, doesn't have audio, or, yeah, I don't know. It's not too often that I just export the video. I could see maybe as kind of like a backup, but I don't really see how exporting it without the audio is hugely helpful. So it'd have to be a pretty specific situation. So that's one way that you can export a master file or part of a master file. But you might notice here, if we go again back into share and master file, that there are some options that are grayed out, in particular resolution. So you say, I want to export this at a different resolution for whatever reason, and it's not giving me that option. And this is one of the kind of gotchas in Final Cut X, because you can't do that here in the share option. You have to actually change the resolution of your project before you can do that. So we got the, we have to select the project here first, then we can go into modify settings, and here's where we can change things to the point where we can actually go to custom and we can create any aspect ratio we want. We could have something, maybe you're making vertical video for like a banner ad or something, you could do weird things with that. So you can customize that however you want here, but you have to do that in the project first, and then when you go to export, you'll have that option. So there's some things you have to change in your project that you can't necessarily change when you are exporting. But as you can see, you've got a lot of things here you can mess with too. Format. So if you wanted to do something insane like 5K, you'd have to do that in the project before you go to export. All right, and good luck with that. Along with that, you can create some other destinations, as Final Cut likes to call it, which is basically settings for sharing or exporting. So you got these default ones here. You hit add destination. Here are a whole bunch of other ones that you can add, some that aren't automatically included, and then some that you can customize. So you can see if we match up icons here, this says master file, but I could double click export file, and I could say I only want audio, I want it to be MP3, and sure, I want to do all those things. So now if I click on here, come on, there we go, and I choose MP3, now I have custom settings so that whenever I want to export an MP3, I can just choose this. And this is in the settings for our for Final Cut X here. So now if we click on that, I have that MP3 option, and I can also delete some of these if I never export to Vimeo. I never want to save current frame, which is basically sharing a freeze frame, which is kind of nice. So if you just line up the position indicator where you want it, and it will export whatever it sees there as a JPEG, Photoshop, TIFF, whatever. So that's how you can export a freeze frame too, which is definitely handy, and something you want to do from time to time. So that's a just quick introduction to sharing in Final Cut X. Okay, there's a couple other things I wanted to tell you. Sometimes we want to create kind of like alternate versions of our video. Let's say we want to create a version where there's no titles or no connected clips. So we could select one, shift click, and have it select all of the connected clips, go in there and choose disable, and then we could export a version that has no connected clips as kind of a backup. You know, maybe we wanted one version that I don't know, maybe we put subtitles in our video at this point, which would be a little bit weird, but certainly could. If people were speaking in another language, or if you have lower thirds, you know, titles and stuff that you don't want, you can disable those connected clips when you export, so that you don't have those there. So other than that, I think one of the main tips that I can give you is do a little test first. Mark it in and out, and export just a small portion to make sure you got your settings right. And when you're set, you can go ahead and do the whole project. That will save you a little bit of frustration. All right. Next video, we'll talk about DVD exporting and some media management, relinking videos, which is pretty scary to have to do that, and archiving. So thanks a lot.